Back in 2010, the running shoe market was dominated by giants like Nike and Adidas. Fast forward to today, and a new player on the block has them all doing the chasing. In just over a decade, On Running, a Swiss company you might not have heard of until recently, has captured 10% of the performance running shoe market in the United States. That's right, a company that didn't even exist 15 years ago now accounts for 1 in every 10 performance running shoes sold in America's $20 billion running shoe market. But while On has been sprinting ahead, Nike, the undisputed king of sneakers for decades, has been stumbling. In 2022, Nike lost its crown as the #1 brand in running shoes to smaller brands like Hoka, Brooks, and yes, you guessed it, On. So how did this happen? How did a small Swiss company with a weird name and even weirder-looking shoes manage to outpace the swoosh? Well, the answer lies precisely in the meteoric rise of those shoes with hollow soles. Let's rewind to 2010. The sneaker world looks very different. Nike is at the top of its game, churning out hit after hit. Adidas is nipping at their heels. And in a small workshop in Zurich, Switzerland, a retired athlete named Olivier Bernhard is cutting up garden hoses. Now, you might be wondering, what do garden hoses have to do with sneakers? Well, for Bernhard, everything. See, Bernhard wasn't just any athlete. He was a multi-time Ironman champion, someone who knew the punishing effects of long-distance running on the body. And he had an idea. What if you could create a shoe that gave you the soft landing of running on sand, but the firm push-off of running on a hard track? That's where the garden hose comes in. Bernhard started experimenting, cutting up hoses and gluing the pieces to the soles of his running shoes. It looked weird, it felt weird, but when he ran in them, it felt like running on clouds. Olivier then teamed up with his friends, David Aleman and Casper Copetti, and together, they founded On Running. Their mission was to create a shoe that would make running feel like you're floating on clouds. But starting a shoe company in a market dominated by giants like Nike? That's crazy. The odds were stacked against them. The athletic footwear industry is notoriously competitive, with high barriers to entry and consumer loyalty to established brands. Nike itself had been dominating the market for decades. They had the best athletes, the biggest marketing budgets, and a logo recognized around the world. How could a small Swiss company even hope to compete? But On had an ace up their sleeve, or rather, under their soles. Enter CloudTech, On's proprietary cushioning technology. Instead of a flat sole, On shoes have these weird-looking pods on the bottom. These clouds, as On calls them, compress when your foot lands, cushioning the impact. Then comes the clever part. They lock together to create a solid surface for a powerful push-off. It's like having a personal trampoline for your feet. Soft landing, explosive takeoff. It was unlike anything else on the market. But having a great product is one thing. Getting people to buy it is another beast entirely. They had to convince people to try their weird-looking shoes. I mean, have you seen the first On shoes? With their distinctive outsoles full of hollow pods, they looked like, well, I don't know, weird. Then there was the question of production. Making shoes at scale is complicated and expensive. On had to figure out how to mass-produce their unique design without compromising on quality. And let's not forget distribution. How do you get your shoes into stores when you're competing against giants like Nike, who have long-standing relationships with retailers? Worse yet, On knew it was entering a market where Nike had been the 800-pound gorilla for decades. How do you compete with a brand that has Michael Jordan, LeBron James, and Cristiano Ronaldo on its roster? On's answer? You don't. At least not directly. Instead of trying to out-Nike Nike, On decided to zag where others zigged. They focused on performance running, targeting serious runners and triathletes who cared more about function than fashion. Their marketing wasn't about celebrity endorsements or flashy commercials. It was about the technology, the running experience, so they focused on getting their shoes onto the feet of running store employees and local running clubs. Why? Because runners trust other runners. If your local running guru tells you these weird Swiss shoes are amazing, you're way more likely to give them a try than if you just see them in an ad. This word-of-mouth strategy allowed On to build a loyal following among serious runners. And slowly, but surely, it started to work. By 2012, On released the Cloud Racer, a performance shoe that caught the eye of Swiss professional triathlete Nicolas Spirig. Spirig wore On shoes when she won gold in the triathlon at the London Olympics that year. Suddenly, people started to take notice of these weird-looking Swiss shoes. But On wasn't satisfied with just being a niche brand for elite athletes. They had bigger ambitions. They wanted to create a community around their brand to make On more than just a shoe company. So they started organizing running clubs and meetups. They sponsored local events and marathons. They engaged with their customers on social media, sharing user-generated content and running tips. They weren't just selling shoes, they were selling a lifestyle, a sense of belonging. Sure, Nike is the king, but it started to feel impersonal and distant. But On, it felt approachable, like a friend who really gets your passion for running. But let's be real. Building a brand takes more than just a good product and some clever marketing. It takes money. Lots of it. And that's where On faced its next big hurdle. Unlike Nike, with its deep pockets and global reach, On was a small startup with limited resources. They couldn't afford massive advertising campaigns or lucrative athlete endorsements. They had to be smart with their money and strategic with their growth. So they focused on what they did best: innovation. They poured resources into research and development, constantly refining their cloud tech technology and expanding their product line. They also prioritized sustainability, using recycled materials and developing programs for recycling old shoes. They were searching for and finding ways to stand out from their bigger competitors. On's growth was steady, but not explosive, until 2019. That's when they pulled off a marketing coup that would catapult them into the mainstream. They signed a certain Swiss tennis player as a shareholder and brand ambassador. You might have heard of him. Roger Federer? Yeah, that Roger Federer. Federer's involvement was a game-changer for On. Suddenly, this quirky Swiss running shoe brand was associated with one of the greatest athletes of all time. But On didn't just slap Federer's face on their existing products. Instead, they collaborated with him to create the Roger, a tennis-inspired sneaker that bridged the gap between performance and lifestyle. The Roger was a hit, helping On break out of the running niche and into the broader sneaker market. It was sleek, stylish, and still incorporated On's signature cloud tech cushioning. It appealed to fashion-conscious consumers who might never have considered buying a running shoe before. This move into lifestyle sneakers was crucial for On's growth. While performance running shoes are the heart of their business, lifestyle sneakers opened up a whole new market. And it's a market where Nike has long reigned supreme. But On wasn't just copying Nike's playbook, they were writing their own. In 2021, On shook up the sneaker world by going public. The IPO was a smashing success, raising about $746 million and valuing the company at over $7 billion. Suddenly, this little Swiss company that started with cut-up garden hoses was playing in the big leagues. The influx of capital allowed On to accelerate its growth. They expanded their product line, invested in marketing, and pushed into new markets. They also doubled down on their commitment to sustainability, developing new materials and production processes to reduce their environmental impact. The IPO gave On the resources to go toe-to-toe with Nike and other big brands in the innovation race. In 2022, On launched the Cloud Monster, a maximalist shoe that marked a departure from their usual designs. With its oversized sole, the Cloud Monster was On's answer to the chunky shoe trend popularized by brands like Hoka. It was a bold move, showing that On could adapt to changing consumer preferences while still maintaining their unique identity. But On wasn't just focused on shoes, they were thinking bigger. In 2023, On made another splash by announcing sponsorships of top tennis players, including world number 1 Iga Świątek. This move put them in direct competition with Nike in yet another arena, showing that On was no longer happy with just being a running shoe brand. So, how did we get here? How did this small Swiss company manage to become a thorn in Nike's side in just over a decade? First off, On had a really unique product. Their cloud tech technology wasn't just a marketing trick, it actually gave runners a different experience that really connected with people. Second, On was smart about their growth. They didn't try to beat out Nike from the start. Instead, they focused on a niche, performance running, and built a loyal following before expanding into other areas. This allowed them to establish a strong brand identity and customer base before taking on the big players in the broader sneaker market. On top of that, On's timing was perfect. They hit the market just as people were getting more into health and running. Plus, the rise of athleisure fashion worked in their favor, making their performance-focused designs popular even with folks who weren't runners. By 2023, On was no longer the plucky upstart. They were a serious player in the sneaker world, with a market cap of over $14 billion, with sales that are surpassing $1 billion. And that's when they achieved the unthinkable. They overtook Nike in the US performance running shoe market. For the first time in decades, Nike's dominance was being genuinely challenged, and not by another giant like Adidas, but by a relatively young company that had done things differently from the start. From a small startup experimenting with cut-up garden hoses to a publicly traded company worth billions. Well, that's very impressive to say the least. Times are changing and new players are very hungry for market share. As for Nike, well, they might want to lace up their running shoes a little tighter, because On isn't just coming, they've arrived, and they're here to stay. But not every company that has tried to challenge Nike's dominance has succeeded. Check out the story of the tragic downfall of Under Armour, another company that was on its way to surpassing Nike, but a few strategic missteps led to its decline. We'll see you there.